is should be topic number 4 says, is he scamming or speaking the truth? This takes us to Instagram. We'll watch. It's a reel, so it's short. We'll watch and then we'll discuss.
Here's the other problem with the church is that anytime a person is in need, y'all go to running and dropping money. But let me tell you something, the poor will be with you always. And there is no blessing connected to blessing the poor other than getting back what you gave to them, but no multiplication. Multiplication is segregated for tithes and offering. When you give to the poor, the only thing you do is help them, but you don't help yourself. Charity does not bring wealth. Only the tithe does that. So when you give $1 to somebody on the street talking about I did my job, God like, thank you, but it ain't gonna help you. Read your Bible. Here's the other problem with the church is that anytime a person is in need, y'all go to running and dropping money. But let me tell you something, the poor will be with you always. And there is no blessing connected to blessing the poor other than getting back what you gave to them, but no multiplication. Multiplication is segregated for tithes and offering. When you give to the poor, the only thing you do is help them, but you don't help yourself. Charity does not bring wealth. Only the tithe does that.
So like I said, it's a short video. I played it twice. I wanted to read some of the comments just to see what people's thoughts were. And back in the days says, basically, he's saying don't give your money to the poor, give your money to him. Clown, clown, clown. Discuss Doe said this is the closest we can get to a scammer confessing to scamming. Michael Palmer says time to stand up and walk out of that church. Layla Cinnamon says don't help the poor, help me with my luxury lifestyle. Son Michaud says, say what? Laugh. Go and sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. So you see a lot of people are kind of pushing back against Pastor Keon Henderson and what he had to say about helping the poor. So should be topic number 4 says, is he scamming or speaking the truth? Let me try to get Anthony in while I can see him here. Anthony, how are you this week? Unmute your mic, brother. No. Okay, Anthony. Anthony, I don't know if you see how to unmute your mic, but you should see a microphone icon somewhere there. All right, we'll come back. We'll come back to Anthony. Hopefully he'll get it right. Jose, what say you? Is he scamming or speaking the truth?
I was on another frequency, sort of. I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Especially the Yesayers in the room. Like 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 are you hearing what he says? But what it made me think of is you have this documentary maker with a particular style, Adam Curtis. And if you watch the first episode of The Century of Self, and after that you watch the first episode of the trap, fuck you body. That's another short series. If you watch both first episodes of 3, you'll see. Well, I tend to see that first they made consumerists of us. They taught us to demand stuff, things that we wanted. But when we learned to demand stuff, we started to demand what we needed. So civil rights movements and women's rights movements came up, and what you see in the trap "fuck you, body" is, I guess, the solution that in that you see they turn us against each other. So this dude made me think of it like yeah, like literally the title of the second documentary, "Fuck You, Body." It's a cold world, and people are getting insanely individualistic. Like how can you say it? What is the church? What is the church? It's a community building, and it hasn't been a community building for a long time. But this is insane. This is insane. I'm flabbergasted. Resume. I'm flabbergasted. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Jose in the chat, Real Black Gentleman says only the tithe does that. Only that 10% does that, apparently. Cheryl says it's true that giving money to the poor doesn't help them in the long run, but what you can do is give them skills. Real Black Gentleman says there's a cartoon on hip hop cartoons with a similar appeal about the tithe. Cheryl says this guy isn't invested in giving his own people anything of substance. That's the real problem. Lastly, Real Black Gentleman says it's about separating tithes and offerings. The idea is that the tithe comes first and everything else is additional. I see Anthony still has some issues getting on the panel, so I'll go to Black Steel in the meantime. Black Steel, what say you to this? Is this guy a scammer or what?
I mean, he's just a typical preacher, if you ask me. I don't really see the difference between preacher, scammer. It all kind of blends together, if you ask me. But one thing he said, I mean, in the comments they mentioned Matthew 19:21. Give all you have to the poor, and you will have riches in heaven. Then come and follow me. Now, that's Jesus who said that. So, if you ask me, I don't know where he's getting his information from, but the problem is that we have ready access to this book called the Bible that Christians supposed to believe in. So his words directly contradict those of what are written within the scriptures. So what I recognize is it's just a method for him to get money, because you should want to help your fellow man, especially when they're down, right? In Islam, that is one of the five pillars of Islam, giving alms to the poor. That's the requirement that Muslims have to do in order to live a good life. So, but this man is saying that's all well and good, but that's not going to heal your soul, right? So his concern is more of life in the hereafter. So it's okay to help them, but if you're concerned about your eternal well-being, you're going to store riches in heaven. That means you got to tithe. And he's basically selling people on the idea of a hereafter, suffering on earth, so that way in the hereafter you can have some benefit. So yeah, I definitely don't trust what this dude is saying, but I think it's par for the course of all religious institutions. We're just trying to get money. Remember Bishop Bling? Wasn't it Bishop Bling? The Christian church has come a long way from when it started back in the first century. People having religious ceremonies in their homes and praying in secret, to now it's just the largest uh, money laundering organization in history. So I'll leave it there. I'll let Anthony speak. Thank you.
All right, Black Steel, thank you for that. Let's see if Anthony can speak with us. Well, Anthony just dropped off again. I don't know what's the deal, man. With that said, let me read some comments. Cheryl said this guy isn't invested in giving his own people anything of substance. That's the real problem. Real Black Gentleman said it's about separating tithes and offerings. The idea is that the tithe comes first and everything else is additional. I know I read those before. KW Don 7 is still with us out there. He said A preacher is a glorified pimp. Trigavi 262 plus says there can be an appeal and understanding that nation build requires those of reliability, which means they must be self secure in wealth, but wealth distribution is an absolute must for Africa. Lastly, Real Black Gentleman says, where in history did we give 10% of our wealth to a priest every week? Please show me the source. With that, I'll throw it to Oni. Oni, is this guy scamming or telling the truth?
Yeah, so I do want to say that I think Anthony said that he couldn't hear this chat because I noticed that his mic wasn't muted. So I don't know if he's I don't know if the window he's using is itself muted. That might be his problem. So hopefully you can hear that. But yeah, obviously he's scamming. I mean, like it ain't no, you know what I mean? Ray Charles can tell you that. But the thing that the larger issue, I think, is that, you know, the church in general is a scam, you know? And especially, I was having this conversation with this religious brother at one point, and I realized, you know, we got to come to terms with this, or I got to come to terms with this, or basically, most people don't read. You know what I mean? Like most people don't read. So you have these like a lot of what gets people is ignorance. You know, because most people don't read. So us on the panel, we read. All right, we read. That makes sense, right? Some of us even write, but the reality is that like you go to a church and maybe the pastor read it. And not maybe, I think the pastor reads, right? But the congregation, generally speaking, is not reading. You know? A lot of times when you see somebody who does read, they tell you, hey, I'm not even involved in the church. Like I don't even go to any religious organization. It really comes back to, yeah, you know what? People actually don't read. Um, and so when people don't read, you can fool them when they think you did. When they think you are an authority on something, you can fool them. You know, now you don't have to be particularly well read. You just have to be an authority on so on and so forth. So, you know, I don't want to say who I was speaking to, but there are people who they follow a religion. Okay, they believe the religion is the truth. It's the quote unquote word of God. And then you press them about the religion. They say, look, I actually haven't read it myself, but I can give you contact. I can give you communication with somebody who has. You know, I can give you, the pastor. I can give you an imam. I can give you a whatever. I can give you somebody else who has, and that kind of tells you because on the one hand, these people are convinced this is the actual word of a God, right? And a God is not a joke. If there were a God, um, you would want to pay deference to something that can obliterate you in seconds or whatever, right? However, these people are convinced about this, yet um, they like somebody else can tell them what to do. You get what I'm saying? Somebody else can tell them, hey, you know what? You shouldn't be talking to this person. Someone else can tell them, hey, you shouldn't be giving money to the poor. You should be giving money to your church. Okay, someone else can tell them, that's not a good person to marry. Somebody else will tell them, hey, come to this back room and play with my feet or something, right? Kiss my feet. Let me sleep with your wife. Let me do this kind of stuff, right? That's a huge problem when it comes back to, yeah, if you're not reading or if you're not reading the actual sources, that's also another problem. Because I'll say this. I know Anthony said that last week. Nobody can say anything bad about Malcolm X, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about Malcolm X. But what I'll say is that allegedly, according to Dr. Ben, okay, and this is me, right? according to Dr. Ben, one of the things that Elijah Muhammad was doing was testing out the women. You know, if you brought a woman to, you brought a woman for, in order to marry her, right? Elijah Muhammad would see if she's got this stuff for you to marry her, right? That's embarrassing. Okay. Apparently, allegedly, this pissed Malcolm X off, but the reality is that that's what religion can do. And I use Nation of Islam mostly because these guys didn't even have a Quran. Okay, these guys didn't even have a Quran, so it's like even if you were well read in the Nation of Islam, you were reading from what this guy was telling you, who was pretty much trying to sleep with your woman. Who was pretty much just, abusing his power. So it's like, even if you can read, you got to go out and read good things. But the reality is that, but that is so far off from the experience that most people, most humans, not even black people, but most humans have. Most of us are not reading, and we're not reading anything good. The people who are reading, however, I would like to say that a lot of people who are reading are probably in the upper class. Mostly and I say that mostly based off of the experience that we have, where we go to college and we start reading. A lot of us do most of our reading in college. Now, obviously, some of us read after college. I like to put myself in that category, but for the most part, most humans are probably doing their most reading in college, and then we stop. And unless we're like in the top of our field where we're reading, scientific papers every week and magazines, but that's the kind of reading that we're doing. A lot of people outside of that are not reading at all. Okay, maybe Instagram, maybe Twitter, maybe whatever, but that's not real substantive reading. So I'm saying all that to say this guy is talking to a people who he knows do not read, but will give money away. If you're giving money to the poor, you're giving money away. So he's just saying, look, I know you don't read the Bible. I'm going to say, read the Bible, right? To make it seem like I read it. And in my Bible, and because you haven't read it, I read it, and you think I read it, and I'm telling you that it tells you to just give me money, right? And I could give you the verse where it tells you to give tithes is good, right? That's it. You have been you will get swindled, and and for me, I'll be honest, that's the whole purpose of the church. It's to get these ignorant people, right, to to bow to the group of literate ignorant people, or the group of people who are behind the church, and this guy's behind the church, in his community, and that's it.
So let me ask a follow up question. Thanks for that, by the way, Oni. Let me ask a follow up question that's around nation building and Africa. We have, as we know, Africa is a very Abrahamic religion dominated space. If any of you gentlemen on the panel, or you folks in the chat, ladies and gentlemen in the chat, were to become the leader of an African nation, let's say, knowing that, hey, you're probably going to have serious turmoil if you try to immediately eradicate religion, then what do you do with it? How do you handle the religion problem for the next generation or two in this hypothetical African nation that you're the leadership of? Let me start with Oni on that one.
So the religion problem. I mean, the thing is that I'm not even sure. So, like I said, the religion organizes. Like, so I wrote in my last book, Wanga Lifu. You guys can check it out. But in my last book, I wrote about how religion is just one of those social mechanisms for like that facilitates the elite. Okay, facilitates that upper class, if you will. Right. The reality is um, if you have like I think when it comes to nation building, right? If you have enough people in critical institutions, right, of a similar ideology, a similar belief system from you, right, you take over the state. And that's and people have to remember what the state is. The state is the arbiter of violence. You know, if you really pursue a state to the to the to the most definitive degree, if you will, right? You are controlling the violence of that community, right? In that sense, it's like it depends on like to what extent or to what degree you're really serious about nation building or what have you, right? But if you take over the nation, right? The reality is that over time you will take over the institutions. You will the resistance will be suppressed, right? If you're doing it right. If you're not doing it right, obviously you will lose your nation. Okay, but if you're doing it right, if you're suppressing that religious voice, if you will, if you don't want the religious voice, that is right. If you're suppressing that religious voice, if you're suppressing so on and so forth, the reality is that over time you will form a state that follows the belief systems of the founders. It's like they say the ruling ideas is the ideas of the ruling class. And of course a lot of this is borrowed from um, you know, what I could see is correct in the Marxist tradition, but basically that's it. I mean, I think that the hypothetical problem of what are we going to do with these religious people? I think people, like I said, most people are not reading. Okay, most people are just looking for authority in their life regarding what regarding the supernatural world or regarding the just regarding life. What makes a good marriage partner? What makes a good husband? What makes a good leader? Right? These are questions that religions try to answer. Like I said, I'm reading through Shaka Zulu. I'm watching Shaka Zulu the miniseries, and I just reached the third episode, and it's about Nandi and how she was, and how basically how her life was before Shaka was born. She sleeps with a prince, a witch saves her, all that kind of, it's nonsense, right? No disrespect to the Zulu people, but it's nonsense, right? And but it's a supernatural story. Okay, it's a supernatural story that legitimizes the leadership, right? And all you have to do, and what it really captures for us is this reality that you have these cultural traditions, right? You have these religious traditions that justify the leadership, and the reality is that no one is so firmly, holding on to it in so much, at the risk of their lives. Like very few people are going to do the martyrdom, to a distinct extent. And I say that because I'm inside of Tanzania, which is about 50-50 Christian and Muslim, right? But the president is a woman, and the president is a Muslim woman. So it's like I don't like that kind of like indicates to me no one, not that no one, but like depending on where you are, like obviously if you're in Nigeria, you're going to have, look, we're going to go for the Fulani man, period, right? Because of that economic disparity. But if you're in you're in Tanzania and they chose Magufuli, the Christian guy, and his runner-up was a Muslim, just off of that, that unity thing, and she was a woman, and it was just like, okay, whatever. So it's like, yeah, for me, I think that religion is a problem, but it's only a problem because they're organized and they funnel money towards people who then leverage that economy towards political representation, right? But if you can curtail their political influence, if you can curtail their economy, um, then you're good. But that's an important thing to really note here, that 10% tithes is a huge advantage for the church, because I've always telling people this, but or not always, but I explained this a long time ago, where if you take 10% of a group of 30 people, right, income, you're earning three times the average income. 10% of 40, four times the average. 10% of 500, 50 times the average, right? So, depending on the size of your congregation, you're suddenly very wealthy, like very locally wealthy. And if you have political ambition, as religious people tend to do, right? If you put, and because religion tends to have political implications, right? Oh, the man is this, the man is that, the woman is this, the woman is that, right? If you have political aspirations, but you also earn four times, five times the average income in your area, and the average income, even in the poor area, four times that is huge. And the average income in a rich area, four times that, 40 times that, 50 times that, is huge, right? So, yeah, if you have political ambition, yeah, you can have that sort of political influence. Now, if you are a leader and you cut back on that political influence, or you are a leader and you put your loyalists in power, right? Then it doesn't really like I don't think it really matters. Like you can take over the state pretty effectively, as long as you put as long as you keep your loyalists in positions of power, and that's kind of what every other people are doing, including the church. The church does not, but the church puts in loyalists in positions of authority. And like we could see Trump doing that in America. We could see the Democrats doing that in America. Everybody puts in loyalists, and that's why I would say, just to finish, ideology is very, very important. That's it.
I appreciate that, Oni. Before I go to Black Steel and Jose, just read some comments from the chat. Cheryl thinks that it's a generational issue. You can't go into an African nation and change what they believe. It took generations for Abrahamic religions to be drilled into us. It'll take generations to get it out. Trighabi262 says, I agree that to do anything in terms of religious reform requires a state. My two issues will always be, what do you replace it with? And how do you make sure there's no backlash, even if you can quell it? Cheryl says, what needs to what needs to implement we need to implement educational institutions, social media information, counter to the Abrahamic teachings. Absolutely. Our boy Anthony is out there in the chat. He couldn't get the panel to work. He says, I would make traditional religions official and promote indigenous culture and give incentives to those who embrace the traditional culture. I like that kind of thinking. Trigger says, yep, spirituality or religions try to deal with the human condition is what I've tried to explain in previous prompts. KW7 says, Rwanda forces ministers to go through theological training before they can open up a church. Yeah, I saw that too, but I didn't get a sense of what was the training. Well, like I didn't get a sense of, is it just more Abrahamic training, or is there some kind of push to Africanize Abrahamic religions? I wasn't certain about that. But with that said, let me hear from Jose next. Jose, what say you as far as that hypothetical that I gave?
Well, it's a church thing, right? You can preach to the choir, or you can go to where the needy people are, and I think those needy people that are lost in those Abrahamic religions, you need to go get them where they are, and I think I think I got something. Well, anyway, yeah, I tend to see layers in the metaphors and what's that other word? Um, um, Allegories. I tend to see a lot of deep, very deep stuff in those allegories, and maybe it's just my mind, but I really believe that it's a thing, because it's so complete, but it's so different. It's not fairy tales. It's literally. Um, what I tend to see is literally the science, or the science of the mind, or something like that. It's but anyway, yeah, you need to find something that you go where they are, and then you break it apart, and you build them up again, just like what pimps do. You pimp them back. You break down the structure that they live in, and you build it up again. And yeah, that's what should happen. And probably on a stealth, probably stealthy, because else they start, yeah, or else they revolt, and label you satanic or whatever. But yeah, you have to go get them where they are. That's my conclusion.
That's a good point. You have to go and get them where they are. In the chat, Cheryl says that Christianity, Judaism, Muslim religion are not culturally ours. Doesn't matter how many ways you turn it, for Africans, it will never work. She says you can't fit a square peg in a round hole. Now, I wholeheartedly agree with that, to tell you the truth. I was just curious to see what Rwanda was really doing by forcing them to go through theological training. I'm just curious what that really means. With
I
that
believe,
said, Black.
I believe, if I
Uh,
may respond to that, I believe it's a bureaucratic thing. It's maybe it's it's control. It's governmental control. I believe it's more of a bureaucratic thing than going into a religion.
okay, okay. With that said, Black C, you heard everything else everyone had to say. What say you to it?
So I definitely believe in the separation between church and state, right? People should be free to worship as they choose. However, your religious beliefs can have no bearing on how we run our government. I think that's why I tend to lean towards secularism. You want to worship God if you want to. If you want to bump your head on the floor, pray to Allah. If you want to shout and scream for Jesus, or if you want to do whatever you want to do, then that's fine. However, your you will still pay taxes in our government. You will not be tax exempt. You cannot campaign politically, like you can't support any type of politician. If I find out you're supporting a politician, I'm gonna raise your taxes. Um, and your religion can't have any influence on how we run our government. We're not going to pass a law because Jesus came to you in a dream and said it's supposed to work. We're not doing that. So I believe in complete separation between religious organizations and the apparatus of the state. Um, the thing, the incentives, right? If I do believe that what's causing the increase of religion is that people, especially when they're suffering, they want an outlet. They want something to feel better. So instead of building more churches, we try to meet the needs of the people. So that way they know that their needs are met. They don't have to look towards a heavenly paradise. They don't have to be content with suffering on this earth with the idea that when they die, all their suffering will be ended. And that's really the appeal of religion, is that people, at their worst, they need something to feel comfort. We're going to deal with the here and now. We're going to deal with making people's lives in this world better, so they don't have to look forward to an afterlife. And I think that if we do that, We separate the powers. Hey, you can believe what you want to in your home, but when it comes to how we run the system, no, you leave that to yourself. We're not building no statue of Jesus. We're not doing any of that. Yeah, we're going to we're going to sit up here and have a society where you can influence how we run our stuff. You can get mad about it, but if I find out that you're using your church to influence our politicians, and you're closed, we're not doing that. That's how I would kind of look at it, me personally.
Appreciate that, Black Steel. In the chat, there was a couple of comments to what Black Steel had to say. Trigger said freedom of religion is the biggest scam there is because no one really following a model of diversity besides countries with multiple religions. It goes on to say typically countries that are of majority will push the major religion. Arabs are mostly Muslims, Euros are mostly Christian. That's what they will push, and they will never let something, I guess, flare up. He says, so to me, it's either a government is supposed to sponsor the culture in a dominant fashion or it's incorporated. Cheryl says, I think if black people want to practice Arab religion, they should go to Arab nations to live, etc. For any other Abrahamic religion. Real Black Gentleman says, Jesus don't need to tell me how to run the water lines. Jesus don't need to tell me how to run the water lines. Lastly, Cheryl says, we don't have time for your kids to be arguing, my kids, about how Jesus is the way, the light, and the truth. Go to Europe with that. I like that as a last word. Unless there's a last word from someone on the panel, then we can just go to Shooter Breeze topic number 5 tonight.